may have contributed to the crash. The second charge relates to what they allegedly did after the accident, taking pictures instead of helping those inside the car. Under French law, failing to come to the aid of a person in need of assistance is illegal. A police report written by the first officers on the scene describes how they found the damaged Mercedes and, quote, numerous photographers shooting the right rear side of the vehicle and its open door. That was the side Princess Diana was on. They say they, quote, ran to the scene trying to move the photographers away. They resisted and pushed back the police officers while continuing to take pictures. They, quote, blocked the police officer from reaching the victim in order to assist her. The police officers say that one of the photographers swore at them and told them to, quote, leave me to do my work. Jack Firestone and his family were in a taxi traveling in the other lane right after the crash. They were questioned yesterday by French police.
What I saw, what my wife saw, were photographers swarming all over this crashed vehicle.
One for sure I remember because there was just so much action, literally walked around the police officer and laid on the windshield, right on the windshield of the car, and was taking pictures.
But lawyers acting for the photographers say they are being railroaded, that the charges against them are more about appeasing public opinion than justice. And the lawyers say the fact that the driver was drunk should mean there is no case against their clients. And Peter, there is some new information tonight about that driver, Henri Paul. He was off duty on Saturday and was called to the hotel when people there realized that photographers were gathering outside. It's not yet clear where or when he was drinking, but the judge today decided that regardless of his drunkenness and the speed at which he was driving, the photographers have a case to answer for. Peter?
Sheila, we're everybody, I think, still fascinated with the car. What do you know in Paris tonight?
Well, yesterday there were a lot of reports from police sources that the car may have been traveling as fast as 121 miles per hour, that the speedometer was in fact stuck at that speed. Today, police sources are saying that the speedometer is in fact at 0, and while the car was traveling fast, clearly above the speed limit, they do not believe it was 121 miles per hour, and it's not yet clear how fast it was going. Peter?
Okay, well, we're going to take this a little farther, if we may, Sheila. On this business of how fast the car was going, until the final tests are done, it is a matter of speculation. But ABC's Lisa Stark, who covers safety for us, has been talking to some crash experts, a lot of them today. Lisa, granted, they've been very quick to tell us they've only seen the pictures.
Right.
But do they make any judgment looking at the pictures about the speed?
The experts I've talked to, Peter, say they do not believe this car was traveling over 100 miles an hour. That's based on the damage to the car and the fact that one person survived the crash. They say the range is more likely in the 50 to 90 mile per hour range.
And do they tell us the speedometer means anything after a crash?
They say the stuck speedometer means nothing. It's the first thing they learn. That doesn't indicate how fast the car was going.
And we have seen all sorts of various sort of make-up pictures of what might have happened, including the car rolling over. What do they think?
The folks I've talked to also do not believe the car rolled over. They say the top looks too shiny for that. They think the damage to the top of the car was made when authorities tried to cut into the car to get people out.
Okay, Lisa Stark in Washington, who covers safety for us, among other things. Thank you very much. We'll be back in a moment with a report from London, including the arrangements for Diana's funeral this weekend. And we will also have some of the day's other news. It's been a wild day on Wall Street. So what is behind the largest gain?
Princess of Wales Memorial Fund. It will take the flood of public donations expected in the coming months and direct them to the princess's charities. Again, in response to public pressure, the palace has scrapped protocol and announced that 500 workers from Diana's favorite charities will march behind her coffin on Saturday. And after the funeral service, the nation will come to a halt for a minute of silence. When the royal family returns to Buckingham Palace later this week, attention will refocus on Prince Charles, last seen Sunday evening, bringing his former wife's body back to England. The thought in so many minds and on so many lips today, can Charles ever go on to become the king of a nation which will always hold him partly responsible for what happened to Diana? Television has already begun to highlight the issue of guilt.
I'm going to use a word very carefully now, Gladys, and that's a word, guilt. Anyone who loses someone, irrespective of the circumstances, must look back on what happened in the past and say, if only.
Everybody that has been, who's part of Diana's family, let's say, or ex-family, is going to feel some guilt.
The Prince of Wales's biographer, Jonathan Dimbleby, has no doubts about the burden that Charles is carrying.
Well, I can...
What they really feel. From the day and night lines at St. James Palace, where Diana's coffin awaits the Saturday funeral,
6 minutes past 2 the time. Welcome if you just joined us.
to the London airwaves.
The last 2 days have been quite hell for me and my husband. And when I heard about the news on Sunday, I was just totally devastated.
This is a nation obsessed with its sense of loss. Even members of Parliament are asking unanswerable questions, such as, what if she had had official British security?
She would not be dead if she had been protected by the Royal Protection Squad still.
The princess had declined official protection, and now, as the Diana Cafe offers its interior as an informal memorial, and as many thousands of condolences flash across the internet, the royal family, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles, are sequestered in Scotland, leaving public bereavement to these people, waiting for hours just to sign the official book of condolences.
It's like a final goodbye to Diana. That's the main reason why we come down.
Came down from Swindon, 2 hours away, and from Birmingham, 3 hours distant.
She was such a special person. She loved everybody. Everybody loved her.
She loved so purely. She cared so deeply. Her Royal Highness, more regal than the royals. And that's it all summed up for me.
There's no question that Diana's funeral will be another regal moment in the history of this country, but her family and the government are insisting that it also reflect her interest in ordinary citizens. And so 500 AIDS patients, elderly homeless, young children, and disabled will also join the procession on Saturday morning following the coffin to Westminster Abbey. Peter?
Jim, not to put too fine point on it, I'm picking up signs or hints of a power struggle between the royal family and the Spencer family about the way this service is really going to be. Am I getting it right, do you think?
It's possible that there is some conflict and some tension, Peter, but mainly I think what's going on here is an effort to make everyone happy, and that is an absolutely impossible task at this moment. For the royal family, it is no easy time, clearly. And for the Spencers, who really did want a very, very private and personal funeral, it's also a difficult time. So I can imagine that there are tensions there.
Okay, Jim Wooten, thanks very much.
A distant princess, but a loss much more personal, much too close. For all her fame, somehow Diana was approachable, of a time and style different from Jacqueline Onassis and Princess Grace. Women related to her because she appeared to relate to us, someone many women saw more as a peer than a princess. Author Mary Cantwell.
She had had emotions that we all recognized and expressed them, sometimes with anger, but without whining and with very little rancor.
In Diana, women saw their most private struggles and emotions, a desire to be loved and accepted, when the truth was a hollow marriage and difficult in-laws. Many American women understood it wasn't all a fairy tale. Ellen Goodman of the Boston Globe.
They belong to the post-Prince Charming generation, and her story was what happens after Prince Charming turns out not to be Mr. Right.
Diana's beauty often obscured deep pain and insecurity. Stories of her depression and an eating disorder, not unfamiliar emotional ground for women here. Her position could have made her pretentious, yet she allowed her conflicts to appear more real, and women found comfort in that. Psychologist Dr. Harriet Breaker.
There's something I think just reassuring about the fact that if it could happen to her, boy, it could happen to anybody. And it must happen to a lot of people.
And so a lot of women felt they knew her, not only because they were drawn to her, but because she reached out to them. Mickey Taylor of Essence magazine.
One is struck by the fact that she stepped out from behind that gilded cage, if you will, or those palace walls, to do this, to move in and amongst the people, to share human emotions, to share the realities of life.
Realities which include raising children, being a single parent, fighting to create an identity. Diana reinvented herself. Women watched it all, admired it, understood it, and will miss it.
And that sense that there was more to this and that she was in the process of becoming. That's what a premature death cuts off. And that's what people relate to so strongly, that this wasn't the end of the story. It's just the death of it.
And so women lose more than a princess. The hope she represented is gone too. Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And it was adorable, but he didn't ask me, his mother did.
This picture of Diana with Patrick was taken by a photographer that day. It was the beginning of her relationship with the press.
She'd call some mornings and just say that she couldn't bear to leave her apartment and get out and face the crowds on the outside her door.
By Christmas, the Robertsons had moved back to the States. 2 months later, Charles and Diana were engaged.
In May, the invitation to the wedding and to the party at the palace showed up.
The Robertsons were among the few American couples invited. They sat just across from Margaret Thatcher.
Pat and I were just pinching ourselves the whole time.
After the wedding, Diana stayed in touch. When she came to the U.S. in 1985 on her first state visit with Charles, she escaped her official duties to have Charles meet Patrick and the Robertsons at the British Embassy. 5 years ago, she had the family to lunch at Kensington Palace.
And she just came bursting through the door, and I sort of said, gosh, shouldn't I curtsy or do something? And she said, absolutely not. I loathe formality, and just came over and gave me a big hug.
It was the last time they saw her.
Just as it looked as if maybe she was going to get a little peace and quiet and privacy, it just seems so outrageously unfair.
And so this family grieves in a special way for a nanny named Diana, whose references were fit for a queen.